Discussion is on the Quranic term Rabb. Through the reading of the Quran and by its contrast with the Bible. Now, this is a part of a much bigger inquiry, deciphering the reference points for the Quranic pronouns I, we, he, and in particular, the word Lord that appears within the Quran, reference to other Abrahamic scriptures, especially in the stories of Adam, Hazrat Ibrahim, and Hazrat Musa, where Lord is seen more emphatically in that capacity in which we are looking at the word Lord at present. The Prophet had said that Quran elaborates on itself. Some parts of the Quran give meaning of other parts of the Quran, and therefore seek to understand the Quran through the Quran itself. So that's the method we'll be using. However, since the Quran is not an isolated instance of the communication of God, and since the Muslims have already given a commitment to believing in previous scriptures, it makes sense to understand the Quran not only through the Quran itself, but within the Quran of the broader phenomena of revelation and communication of God. So we will be looking at the Quran through the lenses of the previous scriptures as well, although I believe the Quran ought to be interpreted within the broader scripture, even beyond the Abrahamic, because it's actually talking of the same things in different ways. Now, the hermeneutical principles for this particular theme is that we look at the ineffability of the nature of God, the nature of God's communication, and the aspect of literalism, to look at the Quran in its literal capacity unless metaphorization is warranted. Now, we will discuss them as preludes. They might be a little bit lengthy. And on that point, if I get any details wrong, please put me right and explain to me at the end during the Q&A. And if I get any of the references wrong, then again, please enlighten me. So when it comes to the nature of God, the Quran says in Surah Hadid, verse 3, هُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ وَالظَّاهِرُ وَالْبَاطِنُ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. But that's a discussion for another time. Then we look at Surah Nur, verse 35. Allah nur as-samawati wal-ard, mathalu nurihi kamishkatin fihi misbah. Now, we know this verse. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. The simile of His light is like a niche within a crystal, illuminated, and the fuel is about to glow even if fire touches it not. So both of these verses, and we're going to cite other verses, are talking of the ineffable nature of God, the all-embracing nature of God. If you look at Surah Ikhlas, say He is Allah one. He is Allah the impregnable one. He is Allah from which nothing issues forth, and He has not issued from anything. And there is no equal to Him. So that's the nature of God from that surah. Then we look at Surah Shura, verse 2. Fatir as-samawat wal-ard, the originator of the heavens and the earth. Now there's a reason why the word Fatir is used as opposed to the word Khaliq. There's a lot of nuance here. And He has made for you from yourselves pairs, and from the cattle He has made pairs, and He has multiplied you. Then it comes, Laysa kamithlihi shay. Like Him there is nothing. So from this first prelude and the hermeneutical principle, what we find is that God is ineffable. God cannot be conceptualized. In fact, if we go properly into it, God is someone that cannot be spoken of in any meaningful way. But at least we get some understanding from these verses, but in the realist sense, He cannot be spoken of in any meaningful way. Now, when it comes to the communication of this mighty, ineffable God, this is what He says in Shura 51. وَمَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَن يُكَلِّمَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا أَوْ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ أَوْ يُرْسِلْ رَسُولًا فَيُوحِي بِإِذْنِهِ مَا يَشَاءُ. So it is not proper for God to talk with bashar. Now bashar here means skinned person, person with this exposed skin, what we call humans today, this brand of humans. It's a particular brand of human, bashar. Save that he inspires them, or he speaks with them from behind a veil, like the burning bush of Moses that is commonly thought of as a veil. Or he sends a messenger. Now this messenger are not the prophets here. It's quite obvious. فَيُوحِي بِإِذْنِهِ. And this messenger then reveals by the consent of God. So yuhi is not the active participle for the yuhi, the fa'il for the yuhi is not God. Otherwise you would not say bi'idnihi. And this messenger then reveals by his consent. Can you see that? So it is not God revealing. This messenger reveals by his consent. So it's not the prophet either, because the prophet is not revealing, the prophet is merely communicating. Bi'idnihi. Then there is ambiguity, ma yasha, whatever he wants. Whatever the messenger wants, or whatever God wants? Or does it mean both? That God is sanctioning a medium and giving the meanings to the messenger, and the messenger then transmits it in accordance with the context. So the phraseology of the message is beholden to the messenger, not to God. And we find this theme in the Quran, that God is Wallahu a'lamu bima yunazzil. When an ayah is replaced in place of another ayah, they say, he's a liar. Say Allah knows what he is revealing. He can change verses and we merely phrase it. For example, that's a possibility, but as I said, these are broader discussions. Prelude number 3. Verses are not to be metaphorized unless warranted. Now, Yadullah fawqa aydihim. God's hand is on their hand. It's a metaphor. We know this for a fact. We also use it today. God's help be with you. May God be by your side. These are metaphors. But what about مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدَ لِمَا خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيَّ? What prevents you from prostrating to that who I have created with my 2 hands? It's not a simple metaphor here, and we can't reduce it to a metaphor. You would need some hardcore evidence to say that this is a metaphor. Just like if there was no Kaaba and we were told there was a house of God on earth, we would say that's a metaphor. But we know there's a physical cube there in Mecca. The metaphor is in the attribution of it to God. But there is some entity there known as the Kaaba. Then again the verse, وَالسَّمَا بَنَيْنَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. The heavens we've made with hands, many hands, and we are constantly expanding them. Now we know from our astrophysics that the heavens are expanding. But why the utility of hands? These are not to be reduced as simple metaphors. Now, look at this verse. It's in Surah Baqarah. The verses before these are talking about the obstinate nature of the kuffar. But Surah Baqarah, by and large, is a dialogue with the Jewish community, the influential Jewish community in Medina. At this point then, in the second juz, the emphasis shifts to ahkam. And then you have this constant sort of arguments push towards the deniers. In that this verse comes, but I'll give further context. هل ينظرون إلا أن يأتيهم الله في ظلل من الغمام وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورُ. Do they wait, save for God to come to them in clouds of smoke, in clouds, within clouds, and the angels, and the affair is decided? Now immediately, the mind rushes towards a metaphor. How can God come? Why does that happen? This is what Tabatabai does. Tabatabai compares this verse with the verses talking of the ineffability of God. So if you say God is ineffable, he doesn't sit on anything or doesn't come down or go up, then the obvious thing is that you will metaphorize it and you will say, well, this doesn't mean God coming with the angels. What does it mean? It means the decree of God, the warning of God. And then he also resorts to a hadith from Imam Rabb that the command of God will come. Are they waiting, say, for the command of God to come and destroy them, for example? Yeah? So it is metaphorized. And I'm saying you cannot metaphorize it unless you have solid grounds to metaphorize. Now, the verses in Surah Baqarah for the first juz are all concerned with the Israelites. Now here somebody can argue the verses prior to this verse are talking about the kuffar. So it's nothing to do with Israelites, but that's not true, because the verse after this immediately says, Sal Bani Israel. Ask the Israelites, the children of the Israelis. So the context was again the Jewish people. Now, we'll move there slowly. I want to spend some time on this particular prelude or hermeneutical principle. So certain Sunni tafasir are in agreement with Tabatabai, such as Jalalain. They say it means the command of God to descend. Others interpret it more literally to mean the day of Qiyamah, in which they say, for example, Tabari, angels will come in clouds of smoke and God will come as He wishes, retaining the literalism of it to an extent. And yet others interpret the clouds of smoke literally, but more literally than Tabari. For example, Ibn Kathir quotes Abu Huraira as saying, it's a lengthy hadith from the Prophet, God will descend in clouds of smoke with the angels on the day of judgment. Al-Hafidh says, God will descend from the throne to the chair in clouds of smoke on the day of judgment. Very literal interpretation. Mujahid, obviously the Tabi'i, he says, clouds are not natural clouds in this verse, and it has never happened except for the Israelites when they were lost in the wilderness. Now, this is the meaning I want to explore right now. Yes, just by comparing it with before we go on to the real issue, comparing this with the book of, with the Bible. So in Exodus, we find, by day Yahweh. Now, Yahweh is, according to the Hebrew and the Jewish people, the sacred name of God, personal name of God. Yahweh went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. Exodus 14:24, during the last watch of the night, Yahweh looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw them into confusion. By the way, Yahweh means He who is, or He who causes whatever is to happen. A literal translation. Exodus 40:38. So the cloud of Yahweh was over the tabernacle. They used to carry this point of refuge that had 3 different sections. You know about this, right? The Ark of Covenant and the golden lantern and so on and so forth. So the cloud of Yahweh was over the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the Israelites during all their travels. Again, Yahweh said to Moses, behold, I will come to you in a thick cloud, so that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe in you forever. Then Moses told the words of the people to Yahweh. So here we can see that the clouds of smoke is in reference to the Israelites in the Quran. هَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا يَأْتِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي ظُلَلٍ مِّنَ الْغَمَامِ. Because the Meccan Muslims and the Medinan Muslims could not understand clouds of smoke. The kuffar could not understand clouds of smoke, but the Israelites could understand it. The Jewish community could understand it, and that reference was for them. And it did not mean Allah the ineffable one, but Allah what they understood as the figure of Yahweh within the clouds. So it was in direct reference to them. Now the different connotations of the word Rabb within the Quran. Now this is scattered everywhere. The first is we see the usage of the word Rabb to depict an individual calling out to their own intuitive God. So when we say, Ya Rabbi, we are calling out to the ineffable God with whom we relate. And that's how the Quran has utilized the word Rabb. Look at the verse, Anbiya 80, 89, 90. وَزَكَرِيَّا إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ رَبِّي لَا تَذَرْنِي فَرْدًا وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الْوَارِثِينَ. My Lord, do not abandon me and leave me on my own without an heir. You know the rest of the verse, so I will not go through it. So he's calling out to his Lord, the ineffable one with whom he relates. So the word Rabb is directed to the ineffable God. Similarly, Surah Naml, verse 44. When Bilqis was told to enter into the palace and she assumed that there was a stream of water, she lifted her hem of her garment in order that it does not get wet. Sulaiman Salamullah alayhi told her, these are crystals and they're giving the illusion of a stream. At that point she exclaimed, and she said, قالت ربي إني ظلمت نفسي وأسلمت مع سليمان لله رب العالمين. My Lord here was the intuitive understanding of the ineffable Lord that she relates with. I have oppressed my own soul and I surrender to Allah with Sulaiman, the Lord of the worlds. So here, Rabb is used in the sense of the intuitive God that we all know from within ourselves. The second reference of the word Rabb is an angelic being conversing directly with individuals on behalf of God. So for example, Al-Imran, verse 38 to 41, verses 38 to 41, هُنَالِكَ دَعَا زَكَرِيَّا رَبَّهُ. At that point, Zakaria called on to his Lord that he knows intuitively from the depth of his heart. So he's talking with the real God. قَالَ رَبِّي. He said, my Lord, هَبْ لِي مِن لَدُنْكَ ذُرِّيَّةً طَيِّبَةً. Give me from yourself a goodly offspring or progeny. إِنَّكَ سَمِيعُ الدُّعَاء. You listen to all supplications. فَنَادَتْهُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ. The angels called out to him, and this is the physical calling. وَهُوَ قَائِمٌ يُصَلِّي فِي الْمِحْرَابِ. As he was praying in the sacred place, أَنَّ اللَّهَ يُبَشِّرُكَ بِيَحْيَى. Allah gives good tidings of Yahya. Now they are conveying on behalf of Allah. Allah is giving you good tidings of Yahya. Now the rest of the verse, you know, kalimatan wa husura and sayyida. Qala, Zakaria said, Rabbi, my Lord. Who is Zakaria speaking with here? Rabbi, my Lord. Anna yakunu li ghulam. How can I have a child? Till the end of that sentence. He's saying, my Lord. So the angels are calling out to him. He's hearing something. He's saying, my Lord. Now he might be calling out to real Allah because he doesn't understand anything else but Allah. But listen to what the verse says. Qala kadhalika Allah yaf'alu ma yasha. He said, he is addressing the Lord, Rabbi, my Lord. How can I have a child? He said in response, Allah does what he wants. He is not saying, I do what I want. He's not saying, I do what I want. As opposed to other places in the Quran, Inni ana Allah la ilaha illa ana. Aqimis salata li dhikri. Wala taniya fi dhikri. When God is speaking directly, or the speaker in the Quran narrates God directly. Yeah? Qala rabbi ij'al li ayah. My Lord, make me a sign. Qala ayatuka alla tukallima an-nas thalatha layalin sawiyya ila ramza. He said, your sign is X, Y, and Z. So here, we know when Zakaria is directing his speech, Rabbi, the one who is responding as the Rabb is not God, because he's making a distinction between himself and between Allah. Qala, the Rabb said, Allah does what he wants. The same with the verses of Lady Mary. Then you get this distinction, Rabb of the worlds and the Rabb that converses directly. So Surah Fatiha. Alhamdulillah Rabb al-Alameen. Praise belongs to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Then you get in Surah Baqarah when the Rabb is conversing with Ibrahim. At the end of Surah Baqarah, you find all these verses that we told Abraham and Ishaq to build our house and so on and so forth. إِذْ قَالَ لَهُ رَبُّهُ أَسْلِمْ. When his Lord said to him, Aslim, surrender. Abraham's response is, Aslamtu li Rabbil Alameen. I have surrendered to the Lord of the worlds. There is a distinction here. His Lord says, Aslim. He does not say, I do submission to you. He says, I submit to the Lord of the worlds. There's a bit of a distinction here. There's a bit of a leap here from my Lord to the Lord of the worlds. It could be a little ambiguous at this point. Now you find the figure Rabb in direct conversation independently with the prophets and angels. إِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. When your Lord Muhammad, O Muhammad, when your Lord said to the angels, I am making the one who comes after, or a Khalifa upon the earth. And they said, we do all this and we do all that. قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know what you know not. This is a direct conversation. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ فَقَالَ أَنْبِئُونِي بِأَسْمَاءِ هَؤُلَاءِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Then he said to the angels, now inform me of the names of all of these if you are to be true in what you say. قَالُوا سُبْحَانَكَ. They said, glory be to you, we do not know anything but what you have taught us. Qala, he says, Ya Adam, O Adam, this is a direct form of speech that we are finding. Anbi'ahum bi'asma'ihim. Inform them of the names. So here we are finding there is a Rabb character, or a Rabb reference to the Rabb, who is talking directly with the Prophet or with individuals, independently, and he is not saying it is because from Allah. And that is the Rabb that we want to discuss. Again, in Surah Baqarah, إِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّي أَرِنِي كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. And when Abraham said, my Lord, show me how do you resurrect the dead. قَالَ, he's responding, أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ. Do you not believe? قَالَ بَلَى. He says, yes, وَلَكِنْ لَيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. But for my heart to find assurance. قَالَ, he said, فَخُذْ أَرْبَعَ مِنَ الطَّيْرِ. Take 4 birds, فَسُرْهُنَّ. Train them, إِلَيْكَ. Train them to come to you. ثُمَّ جَعَلَ عَلَى كُلِّ جَبَلٍ مِنْهُنَّ جُزْء. Then place on every mountain a portion of those birds after killing them and separating their parts. Put them there. ثُمَّ دُعُوهُنَّ. Then call unto them, يَأْتِينَكَ السَّعْيَ. They will come to you hastily. وَعَلَّمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. Now, the Rabb is saying, do this, do this, do this. They will come to you rushing and hastily. And know, Ibrahim, Allah is capable over all. Allah is mighty and wise. He's not saying, I'm mighty and wise. The Rabb figure is saying, Allah is mighty and wise. So you can see a subtle distinction here. There is a Rabb figure talking directly with Abraham and also making a distinction between himself or itself and with Allah. So it is this notion of Rabb that we want to now look at within the stories of Adam, Abraham, and Moses within the Bible, to say that this is not the ineffable God that we are accustomed to interpreting as. But nonetheless, what is it? Who is it? We don't know. But for a fact, it is resurrecting and it is the Creator. مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدَ لِمَا خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيَّ. This is the same Rabb. What prevents you from prostrating to the one I've created with my 2 hands? And then in the story of Abraham, he resurrects the birds. Now you can say afterwards, or whatever you want to say, that this is an aspect of Allah, a reflection of Allah, a manifestation of Allah, a function of Allah. You may say all of those things, because ultimately there's nothing but Allah. But we have to then bear the nuance in mind as well, that it is not Allah qua Allah the ineffable. It is Allah as Rabb, for example. That distinction has to be made, one way or another, no matter how we try and interpret it. So looking at the Bible, we find 3 types of designations for God. And they are all tallying up with the notion of Rabb within the Quran, the last notion of Rabb within the Quran. And of course, at one point, the word Rabb comes in Hebrew. Yahweh, the word Yahweh. This was a name revealed to Moses of God, a personal name. And it means he who is, or he who will be what he will be, or he who causes everything to be. Elohim, which is the plural of El. El means God, Elohim means gods. But in the Bible, they translate it as God pretty much like what the Muslims do with the we in the Quran. It's a plural of authority or plural of royalty, the royal plural. And the word Adonai means Lord, because the Jewish people were not allowed to pronounce the name Yahweh. So they resorted to calling him Adonai, my Lord. Yes, like we do, Rabbi. And of course there is Al-Shaddai that we will come to in a little while. So these are the same as the word Rabb in the last sense that we spoke, because they're conversing with the prophets. Now Adam's encounter with Elohim or with Yahweh. Genesis 2:7. If you look at Genesis 1, there's a story of the creation of the first human, which appears to be other than Adam, which curiously ties up with the Quran. The subtleties of the Quran actually point to that there was a creation prior to Adam, some other realm. In any case, we are with Adam here. Then Yahweh Elohim, which means God, formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now, obviously, I'm not quoting the verses of the Quran, but you can make the connections. Then again, so Yahweh Elohim caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then Yahweh Elohim made a woman from the rib, and he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. Then you get the story of the eating of the forbidden fruit. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. The eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths to hide their private parts. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of Yahweh Elohim as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from Yahweh Elohim among the trees of the garden. But Yahweh Elohim called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, Adam, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, Elohim said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then Yahweh Elohim said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate it." Now, you can see the resemblance between this and the Quran and the Hadith literature that we have. But look at the verse of the Quran, Surah Araf. فَدَلَّهُمَا بِغُرُورٍ. Satan made them fall through deception. فَلَمَّا ذَاقَ الشَّجَرَ. When they tasted of the tree, بَدَتْ لَهُمَا سَوْآتُهُمَا. Their private parts became exposed to them. وَطَفِقَ يَخْسِفَانْ عَلَيْهِمَا مِنْ وَرَقِ الْجَنَّةِ. And they began to frantically cover them with the leaves of the paradise. وَنَادَاهُمَا رَبُّهُمَا. And their Lord called out to them as if they were at a distance. أَلَمْ أَنْهَكُمَا أَنْ تِلْكُمُ الشَّجَرَةِ. Did I not prohibit you from that tree? وَأَقُلْ لَكُمَا. And I said to you, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمَا عَدُوٌ مُبِينٌ. That shaitan is an open enemy for you. Now look at the phraseology of the verse. Everything is the same. There's no change between the Genesis and the Quranic account. Nadahuma, at a distance. That tree, because they were away from that tree. This is talking about physical, actual calling out. It's talking about physical distance. But because in our minds we have the notion of an ineffable God, and that is the only God that is talking in the Quran, what will we do? We will metaphorize it. And therefore, if you look at Tabatabai, he will say, Nadahuma means And tilka shajara means a change of dimension and change of status. Because God cannot be in a place and call out. Can you see that? God cannot be in a physical place and call out and say that tree as opposed to tree, because everything is in one place for him. So that forces Tabatabai to interpret it metaphorically, from what I remember, and I'd read Tabatabai obviously 15 odd years ago. But as I said, the rule of thumb is not to metaphorize unless warranted. Now, Lord's encounter with Abraham. Terms used here are Elohim, Yahweh, El Shaddai, and Adonai, to mean Rabb. When Abraham was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abraham and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Now, El Shaddai, according to the Hebrews, is, according to the Jewish scholars, means the Almighty. Yeah? The All-Powerful. But Shaddai was also the name of the God of the mountain, prior to the Israelites encountering God. And we will see that that has a lot of relevance, because maybe they associated that particular area of the mountain with God. And of course, you will see later on that you will find Moses going to the mountain to meet Yahweh. So you can see the connection, Shaddai, God of the mountain, and Moses going to the mountain to converse with Yahweh. When Abraham was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abraham and said to him, I am El Shaddai, walk before me and be blameless. Then Abraham fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant. To the Elohim, to you and to your descendants after you. By the way, the descendants of Abraham are all the Jews and the Arabs, by the way. Yahweh appeared to him in the oaks of Mamre, as he sat at the door of his tent in the heart of the day. Here's Yahweh encountering Abraham, it seems more in a physical manner. Yeah? He said, Adonai, he said, my Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Now here, let us compare these sort of verses of Genesis with the Qur'anic verse, the one that we recited above. O Lord, how will you resurrect the dead? Will you not believe, in order for me to find satisfaction in my heart? Then train 4 birds and call upon them, and know that God is mighty and wise. So you're finding this direct encounter that you find in the Quran within the Bible, or what you find in the Bible within the Quran. The Lord's encounter with Moses, and this is by far the most extensive after Abraham and Noah. There the angel of Yahweh appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When Yahweh saw that he had gone over to look, Elohim called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, Elohim said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the Elohim of your father, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob. At this Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at Elohim. Then again, we find in Exodus, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Then again, Moses entered the cloud and went up on the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses was there with Yahweh 40 days and 40 nights. He did not eat bread or drink water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. Yahweh would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. So now we come to this story that is known to us very well. Then Moses said, "Now show me your glory." And Yahweh said, "I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name Yahweh in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." But he said, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see my face and live. There is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. And when my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my right hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen." Now this is the story of Moses for the first time meeting with God and subsequent times, and finally when Moses asks God to show him himself. Now the depiction of this in the Quran, I've just taken one verse, the famous one of Araf, 2 verses. وَوَعَدْنَا مُوسَى 30 لَيْلَةً, and we, the term we, promised Moses 30 nights. There the term Elohim is coming, gods. وَأَتْمَمْنَاهَا بِعَشَرٍ, and we completed them with 10 further nights. فَتَمَّ مِيقَاتُ رَبِّهِ 40 لَيْلَةً, and the meeting of his Lord completed in 40 nights. So we and his Lord. You got this distinction? وقال موسى لأخيه هارون اخلفني في قومي وأصلح ولا تتبع سبيل المفسدين. So he said to Moses, "Succeed me in the people, amongst the people, and follow the path of the righteous ones and do not follow the corrupt ones." وَلَمَّا جَاءَ مُوسَى لِمِيقَاتِنَا, and when Moses came to the appointed meeting place of ours, again the pronoun is na, our meeting place. وَكَلَّمَهُ رَبُّهُ, and his Lord spoke with him. Now what I'm trying to say here is that if we is the speaker and the one who is meeting, and we met him, would have been the way you phrase it. Not his Lord spoke with him, and we spoke with him. He came to our meeting, place of appointed meeting, or time of meeting, and we spoke with him. This change in the accent and the pronoun is very telling. When he came for the appointed meeting and his Lord spoke with him, there's something else going on here. وَكَلَّمَهُ رَبُّهُ قَالَ رَبِّي أَرِنِي أَنظُرْ إِلَيْكَ, my Lord, show me yourself that I may look at you, exactly as the story of Exodus. Let me see your glory. And Elohim, Yahweh Elohim, replied, "No one can see my face and live, but my face must not be seen." Look at the response here. Qala, he said, "Lan tarani, you will never see me. Walakin unzur ila al-jabal, rather look at the mountain." There Elohim, Yahweh Elohim said to him, "Go within the cleft of the mountain." Yes? Here, rather look at the mountain. فَإِنِ اسْتَقَرَّ مَكَانَهُ فَسَوْفَ تَرَانِي, if it actually remains stable in its place, and you will see me. Now, obviously, because of all the metaphorization that goes on within the Muslim mind and the Quranic scholars, we have an irfani meaning that you will never see me, but see the mountain, and the mountain is depicting the collapse of the ego. When the mountain crumbles, we all say, right? The mountain crumbled, it meant to Moses, let your ego go and you will see me from within. But no, look at the words without metaphorizing them. Look at the mountain. فَإِنِ اسْتَقَرَّ مَكَانَهُ فَسَوْفَ تَرَانِي. It could have meant that if I'm going to look at the mountain, and if it can withstand whatever it's going to receive of the intensity of light or whatever it was, you might see a reflection of something you might see physically. فَإِنِ اسْتَقَرَّ مَكَانَهُ فَسَوْفَ تَرَانِي. فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى رَبُّهُ لِلْجَبَلِ, and when his Lord, not we, reveals himself to the mountain, it crumbles. وَخَرَّ مُوسَى سَعِقًا, and Musa falls unconscious. Now, if you look at these stories, we will see that one is Lord of the world, the ineffable one. One is the term Rabb being used as our personal relationship with the ineffable one. One is the utility of the word Rabb in the meaning of an angelic figure conveying and conversing on behalf of God. And one is the meaning of Rabb, who is conversing independently with the prophets and the angels, not on behalf of God, and who is able to create and resurrect. And that was a third meaning. And that is the notion of Rabb that is coming out in the stories of the Prophet Adam in the Quran and in the Bible, Prophet Ibrahim in the Quran and in the Bible, and Prophet Moses in the Quran and in the Bible. And that is the conclusion, and I will stop there. Thank you.